It's a good thing that it can't solve the act because it surely can't solve itself. They have isolated a problem without a method to address it. What does it mean to reclaim the spectacle? This is the status quo. This is our argument that in the status quo, the human says, let's use the spectacle. Let's look upon the slave. This is a Harvard evidence that is read in the block. We say that is problematic. Emily recreates the problem of the status quo. Furthermore, what is the new political future that they allow for? They still have not explained this. They say that it's different from what happens in the status quo, where these bodies are ignored, where these bodies are merely just looked upon, but no one does anything. They say we need to reclaim the spectacle in order to have a new political future. We don't understand the internal into how that happens. Now, this is the reason that you do not go ask, because if there is a chance that they only recreate the status quo, then that is a reason to reject them. She makes a lot of arguments about how the spectacle and the status quo is inevitable, that instead we need to orient ourselves differently. Our whole next position is that they do not do this, and the fact that they do not reposition themselves, the fact that they do not take a different stance, they only reify the status quo is detrimental to the bodies that they attempt to solve for, is detrimental to solving of the impact of the status quo. Now we can move to the criticism. Again, there is no permutation on the criticism, which means it is necessarily, argument that it is necessarily competitive. We have a few links. The first is that they speak for the other. Now, Dunn says that the quote-unquote destroyed other is actually able to speak for herself. She uses the example of the roach and the black woman. She says that these bodies, even when whiteness attempts to erase them, even when power attempts to erase them, to destroy them, to steal them out of spaces, that they are still able to survive because they're still able to survive because the value is asserted for them. Now we see that we need to use this pedagogical space to continue to assert that value of the other. The affirmative does not assert the value of the other. The affirmative instead says that we need to go and help the other. We need to bring the other back into humanism. We need to give the other the value of the human. We say that is problematic because the value of the human is what justifies the non-human other being characterized as such. It justifies the moving of these bodies to the status of their life, where they could be taken to these torture sites. Now we say that is problematic because it only recreates the impact of the status quo. We say that our second link is the human rights. They attempt to move these bodies into the status of the human. They say that we need an analysis of what happens to the status quo through the lens of human rights. This is their evidence in the 1AC that we need to look upon the fact that these are real human bodies, that these real human bodies can be saved, because humans shouldn't experience this type of torture. But we say that this type of characterization allows them to dictate who is human and who is not human. The human will always be saved. The non-human will always continuously be taken to these torture sites. The reason these bodies are taken to these torture sites is not because they have human rights, it's because these human rights have been taken away from them. Their attempt to give them back these human rights still justifies the existence of the category of human, the category and the distributing of human rights. We say that is problematic and inevitably turns the affirmative. Thirdly, we have returned to their spectacle argument. I don't think that they are handling this really well, because their only response is that there is a spectacle in the status quo and that we need to reclaim this. But our argument is about the way that they use spectacle. That Hartman is very specific to how the spectacle can be re-articulated by the slave, by how the body that is spectacularized is able to disrupt that spectacularization. It is not about how the master who spectacularizes the slave should continue that spectacularization in order to disrupt it, because we say that is only recreation of what happens in the status quo. Now, we say that their argument is that, of course, the human thinks it is good to make the other visible, because this is the way that violence happens in the status quo. The human will always pat himself on the back for assuaging his guilt, for attempting to help the non-human other, or attempting to bring this non-human other back into humanity. But our argument is that it is because he is a narcissist that he likes to focus on himself. He likes to focus on the figure of the human, which is why they still bring this discussion back to one of feminism. The affirmative is the golfer that looks upon spectacular bodies and say, oh my goodness, it's so bad that these things happen to them. We need to change that. But they do not do any of this. Now, the K is able to solve this because the alternative asserts that the erased other still exists, that a pedagogical survival allows us to recognize that the body that is marked for extermination can survive beyond violence. We are the only ones with an articulation that is specific to how our discourse is mobilized in pedagogical spaces. We say that when we are learning about the violence of the state, when we are learning about the biopolitical violence that erases subject bodies, that we need to always be asserting the survival of these bodies. We always need to assert the survival of these bodies and the value of these bodies that goes beyond the state or the human's ability to save them, because that is what justifies the violence on these bodies. We say that the slave and the object speaks the gums, says that the road speaks. We can be that agency for the spectacle that disrupts the violence of the spectacle only through agency of the spectacle, only through the speaking object, only through the speaking non-human are we able to move beyond the spectacularization, the devaluation, the status quo. This is how we solve the act. Only we have this better pedagogy. She is not doing any of the work of this is the status quo. They are mere re-articulation that they cannot speak for others, but that is not our argument. That they could have had the voice of the other in this round. They choose not to do that. We say that we are that. That is what our dumb evidence is describing. That is what our dumb evidence is describing. There is no reason why the affirmative is able to solve for itself. If anything, only the negative is able to solve.
Yep.